Our third panel is on Ethico-Spiritual Reorientations in an Age of Extreme Nihilism. So if Dr. Muhammad Faruque and Dr. Nauman Naqvi would take the stage. As they're coming, I just thought I wanted to tell a quick anecdote. I remember when I was an undergrad, I was in Memphis at an undergraduate school. The only Muslim in Memphis, almost virtually, certainly at that school I was the only Muslim. Somehow a group of Tablighi Jamaats heard that there was a Muslim in this school and sniffed me out somehow, met me for lunch and introduced themselves, and they were doing dawah. And I remember he said, "Can I have your number?" And I was like, "Sure, absolutely, here's my number, we'll talk again." And for the next 2 weeks, he called me every day at 4 a.m. say, "Brother, you've got to wake up. It's Sehri time." So it was quite my first introduction to the Tabligh happened at that moment.
Bismillah. So I'd like to begin by thanking Professor Naqvi for kindly inviting me to present at this really wonderful, remarkable conference. But I have a personal confession to make before I go further. Actually, I never thought I'd be able to make it to Pakistan because I recently published a book about 2 years ago and a couple of articles. And in those writings, among many other things, there was criticism of Muhammad Iqbal. And I just felt like maybe I'll never be able to come to Pakistan because I'll never be allowed a visa to come to Pakistan. But you made a comment, Professor Naqvi, just a little while ago about Iqbal, and I can see that things have changed. And definitely, Muhammad Iqbal is still a very important figure, and I personally have a lot of respect for him. I'm critical about his ideas, but nothing to do with his person. It's not personal or anything. And
not to demotivate you, he's the only one who can get away with that.
Oh, I see. That's great. I actually sent a copy of my book to the president of the Iqbal Academy, and surprisingly, he also did not. I received a nice kind of reply saying that yes, on this critique, but my critiques are very philosophical, so probably don't cause a lot of issues. Anyway, so I'm going to be talking about a kind of very different topic, but one that is very pertinent, I believe, especially in light of the panel. There was the headline is something about nihilism and reorientation. Yeah. So the title of my talk is "The Burnout Society: Healing Fragmentation through Islamic Spirituality." So who does not feel burnout these days? I think this is something that we all can relate to. So this talk diagnoses the condition of urbanized people around the world who are now suffering from burnout feeling due to overproduction, overperformance, and overachievement. And it does so through the lenses of philosophy, sociology, and psychology. And after describing what the Korean philosopher calls the Burnout Society, I'll offer some remedies by way of Islamic spirituality. And this is the kind of roadmap. So let's try to understand this idea of the Burnout Society. So I have some statistics to quote, and they pertain to the American scene. So the suicide in America is up by 30%. Depression rates are skyrocketing. 36% of Americans report feeling lonely frequently. By the way, this is the first time ever in history in some Western countries there are ministries set up to help lonely people. There are actually Ministry of Loneliness, something in some European countries. Anyway, to go further, 45% of teenagers say they feel despondent and hopeless most of the time. The number of people who say they have no close personal friends has gone up by 4 times 36%. The number of people who rate themselves in the lowest happiness category has gone up by 50%. So statistics are statistics, so you can always question me, and because there are always different kinds of statistics and there's a kind of sample bias. But by and large, it's undeniable because I look at it not just from the point of pure statistics, but also kind of sociological analysis, philosophical arguments, and so forth. It's clear to me, I'm very much convinced that there's something terribly wrong with the way the society, the urbanized people, again, I don't want to generalize the entire world, because people who are not part of this, city life and all that, they're still living a very different life, although they're being affected. So to explain more, there's a direct relationship between some of these neurological illnesses and mental health issues and the burnout syndrome that marked the landscape of pathology at the beginning of the 21st century. And it's also interesting to note that they do not follow from the negativity of what is immunologically foreign, but from an excess of positivity. Thank you. Therefore, they elude all technologies and techniques that seek to combat what is alien. In other words, it's not just a medical issue. It's very much also a social issue. So burnout happens due to sort of a lot of different reasons, but basically it's the idea of performance, the tremendous pressure to kind of perform, to achieve, and also to achieve and kind of compete with others and expand and transform and constantly self-reinvent, and of which depression is the flip side. And it also assumes an identity which is kind of fleeting, which is always kind of changing. Yeah, so this is so interesting. The Burnout Society is also the society of performance, but also what Han calls, Korean philosopher Han calls an achievement society. So we might be familiar with Foucault's idea of disciplinary society. It's a society consisting of the world of hospitals, madhouses, prisons, barracks, and factories. But Han's achievement society, I think we can relate to this more, is a world where you have fitness studios, office towers, banks, airports, shopping malls, and genetic laboratories. Also, Foucault's theory of power fails to explain the transition that is happening today, the kind of topological and psychological changes that are occurring, because in Foucault's conception, there's kind of control and rules and regulation and kind of negative rules. If you are in a school, there are rules about not doing this, or don't do this, don't do that, etc., etc. If you're an organization has rules. So it's a control society. But we're sort of past that society because we now entered an achievement society. So in achievement society, it's more about projects, initiatives, motivations. I don't think I need to explain these things. Like as students, you all have experience. It's what are you doing? Oh, I'm so busy working on this project. Or I have to take, or you just feel like you have to take initiatives to do this intern, to be, to just go ahead of others, explore opportunities even before you graduate. So there's always kind of pressure to motivate yourself to take new initiatives, etc. Whereas in the disciplinary society, it's more about prohibitions, commandments, and the law. Yeah. So while disciplinary society produces madmen and criminals, as we learned from Foucault, while in achievement society, you have depressives and you basically have losers. So as I was saying, depression is one of the symptoms that characterizes the burnout society, and depression is a transition from depression alongside loneliness and so many of these mental health issues. The marked transition from disciplinary society to achievement society. The depressed individual is tired of having to become himself. So let's try to understand the achievement subject more. So this should be contrasted with the kind of obedience subject that Foucault talks about. So here's a quote from Han. It says, quote, "The complaint of the depressive individual, nothing is possible, can only occur in a society that thinks nothing is impossible. No longer being able to be able leads destructive self-reproach and auto-aggression. The achievement subject finds itself fighting with itself. The depressive has been wounded by internalized war. Depression is the sickness of a society that suffers from excessive positivity. It reflects a humanity waging war on itself, end of quote. So what are we learning about this burnout society? Of course, I'll be, as I mentioned at the beginning, I'll be talking about how to kind of overcome some of these issues. But in order to overcome, we have to have a proper diagnosis. We have to understand what's going on, and that's very important. So here, there are some conceptual schemes supported by evidence from various disciplinary endeavors. So Han is arguing, and alongside others, so it's not about negativity. It's not like somebody has told us that you have to achieve. It's rather happening because you can say mass media. We're constantly bombarded with stimuli, information, and the kind of definition of success and all that. But at the same time, there are no restraints. It's so interesting. Unlike the disciplinary society, like you have rules. You have rules for family, society. I'm very much aware that in the global South there is still like society has rules and etc. But what is interesting about the achievement society and the burnout society is that it's happening due to excessive positivity. And this is a kind of very paradoxical situation because it's not like we have lack of freedom. Actually, we have too much freedom, and we are kind of creating this artificial auto-exploitation by kind of forcing ourselves to kind of work more, compete with others, accelerate further, and so it's kind of, the exploiter is simultaneously exploited. Because, there's this internal urge to succeed, to get ahead of others. But who is telling us to do so? Yes, there can be a general pressure, but it's not really like, like we are really forced to do this, and yet we are in this paradoxical situation of being an achieving subject, and in the process feel like we are burned out now. There's so much pressure from work, from responsibilities, and our self initiatives, projects. There's no room for anything else. Right. Just a moment. So to further explain the burnout society, so burnout obviously involves some kind of tiredness. In fact, a lot of these mental health issues that characterize the burnout society also involve forms of tiredness. Now it's interesting, we can talk about different kinds of tiredness. So according to Peter Handke, you might know the famous novelist, there are kind of two ways to understand tiredness. There is what he calls I tiredness, and there is also we tiredness. So what is I tiredness and what is we tiredness? Yeah, so I tiredness is a kind of solitary tiredness. It's the exhaustion of the ego. It's divisive, isolating, and sometimes it can even lead to violence. And this is kind of very general form of tiredness. Tiredness leads to some of these things. You sometimes feel very lonely, isolating, especially in the context of what we are experiencing these days. So this is it's clear that this is negative. But there is also we tiredness, which is actually very different. How? Because we tiredness is actually positive and it's good. It opens and makes room. It allows us to experience Gelassenheit, which is a term which people have been translating in different ways, including Heidegger. So it's a kind of serene calmness or kind of detachment from all sorts of disorder to a kind of contemplative awareness. So we tiredness happens where we're not actually tired alone. We are actually able to share our tiredness with others. In other words, we sort of have a community with whom we can kind of engage when we feel like we're tired from work or from whatever responsibilities we have. So it allows us to it allows Geist, mind or spirit, to emerge. It evokes a sense of wonder. So tiredness, which is a natural human phenomenon, and burnout often leads to tiredness. I mean, inevitably leads to tiredness. It can actually be a positive thing. if we understand it in the sense of we tiredness, like being tired with someone else. But unfortunately, that is not what is happening. And technology, especially cell phone, is much to blame because I'm sure you noticed it's a global phenomenon. I actually travel around the world. I was in Turkey, Morocco, and other places in the last few months. And you can see how global it is. Like whenever you're tired, whenever you feel like you're somehow distracted, actually instead of thinking someone else, you get busy with your cell phone. And the cell phone actually allows you to keep you're so engaged in such a way that you actually forget the world. But at the same time, it leads to all sorts of mental health issues. And of course, with the emergence of ChatGPT and some people calling robots which will become your friends very soon. So I was listening to one of the Silicon Valley gurus recently, and he was saying in a few years, our best friends will be AIs. So this is a real situation, because these technologies are emerging fast, and they're affecting our lives. And they're producing something obviously not desirable, the Burnout Society. So there's also something very interesting related, which is about eye tiredness, which I describe as solitary and lonely and problematic, and the narcissistic self. So at the heart of the Burnout Society is an understanding of the ego, which is really self-centered. And the technology, especially cell phone, kind of contributes to that. It's not helping. Maybe it has other uses. So we are bored, tired, and oftentimes restlessly in search of instant gratification through the cell phone and all the sorts of social media. And we often get emotional titillation without sort of long-term profound involvement. And it also leads to a situation where we end up emphasizing experience and feelings and eating healthy food, taking lessons in ballet or belly dancing, immersing ourselves in yoga, jogging, learning how to relate, overcoming the fear of pleasure. But it's all about the ego. And actually, it's very much connected to some of the educational philosophies. So Professor Gunaike was talking about, I remember, I think it was in relation to Harvard's, mission statement. So the way we set up these institutions and we talk about missions and goals of educating souls is to have a kind of appreciation of your life, be independent, have choices, all of these kind of big terms. But what we end up producing is this situation of achievement society or burnout society, where, obviously, it doesn't feel good to have any of these issues of depression or ADHD and other issues. And the media, of course, has a huge role to play in all of this. The media gives substance to and intensify narcissistic dreams of fame and glory, and encourage the common person to identify themselves with the stars and hate the heart, and make it more and more difficult for them to accept the banality of everyday existence. So there's a kind of deep relationship between being tired in the sense of eye tiredness and being a kind of self-centered, narcissistic self. All right. I actually forgot what time I started. It's all happening the same. You can imagine this is when in America will be sleeping, so I'm just 10 minutes. Yeah. So I want to get to the next part where I want to talk about how to overcome some of this, but I want to ruffle some feathers as well along the lines. So what we are experiencing around the world with respect to urbanized people, it's not an unconnected phenomenon. So in order to have a kind of really profound understanding of what is happening, we need to go back to the understanding of modernity. As Professor Najib John was saying, modernity means so many things, and sociologists, philosophers have exhausted the topic. It can be understood from so many different angles. But it's also a way of being. That is what matters here. It's a way of being that there are people still, if you open the newspaper, I'm sure it's the same whether we're reading New York Times or newspapers here, people still want to give us this rosy idea of progress, development, and success, and all the dreams, fulfilling your dreams, etc., etc. And now I don't want to deny that there is that top 1%. There's definitely some people with a lot of talents, and they do succeed, and they end up becoming billionaires and all that. But at the same time, from when you're analyzing the situation from so many different angles, it's also clear that something is terribly wrong at the very heart of modernity. And during the Q&A, please feel free to challenge. But I'm here arguing that at the end of the day, what is happening is that the so-called idea of the modern self, which also has been analyzed and studied by a lot of Western philosophers and others, there's a profound connection between mental health issues, especially things like schizophrenia, and the modern self. So here, among many other things, I'm drawing on a particular book, and I highly recommend this if you have a chance to read. This is a book entitled Madness and Modernism by Louis Sass. This book shows the similarities between madness and modernism in terms of the defiance of convention, nihilism, extreme relativism, distortions of time, strange transformations of self, and much more. So you might think, can you give us an example? So for instance, both the modernists, especially I'm thinking of modernism in the sense of art, so I'm really thinking in broad brush terms. I'm not just thinking of philosophy. It's manifested, this idea of madness, especially schizophrenia, it's manifested in art, literature, and also philosophy. So for instance, both the modernist artist and the schizophrenic are characterized by a pronounced thrust to deconstruct the world and to subjectively reconstruct human experience without reference to objective reality. And similarly, both the modernist artist and the schizophrenic experience the duality of symptoms, such as not being oneself on the one hand while being all-powerful on the other. So in order to kind of simplify, I have all of these traits, especially if you think of a loss of a unified self. By the way, in his book, Sass, who is a psychologist, he has plenty of examples from modern arts, novels, especially from Antonin, what's his name, Artaud, and then Brisset, and also a lot of other people, some of the famous names are Nietzsche, Hölderlin, and of course Van Gogh, and many others. So if you look at some of these paintings, if you look at some of the novels and so forth, you see how true it is that on the one hand, there's this urge to deconstruct. In fact, you notice in postmodernism and in many academic forms of criticism, you always try to deconstruct some form of power, some form of the social structure and so forth. At the same time, you want to reconstruct it subjectively, but without any reference to objective reality. So what is the end result? End result is sometimes it can be called virtual reality or hyper-reality, because it has the subjective reconstruction, or what some people have called the slide to subjectivity, has no reference to objective reality. That is what is happening in many forms of this literature and arts, and of course philosophy. And so there are philosophers who are now saying, David Chalmers, for example, one of the philosophers, is saying, so what's wrong if you have to live in a virtual reality, if it's all simulation, it's all matrix? Earlier you were talking about, Professor Naqvi was talking about getting out of the matrix. So in the film Matrix, there's actually a character, I think his name is Cyrus. He got so fed up with the human world, he actually thought, he knew that he was in a matrix, the food that he was eating, everything was simulation, it's not real. But he preferred to live in that kind of reality, which was obviously which was false. So it's a concrete decision that we have to make. Of course, these things are analyzed, Baudrillard and other people as well, through different paradigms. All right. So I guess we now have an idea of what is a Burnout Society and what are some of the characteristics. The Achievement Society, society of performance, excessive positivity. It's not the negative, it's not the rules, it's actually the lack of rules and leading to some kind of auto-exploitation. Now, the important question is, this is the situation. How to live in a burnout society? So first of all, as I said, before you think about solutions or before you think about how to deal with it, we have to understand what is going on. That's why I spend so much time. But to kind of summarize it still, so there's no doubt that there's a kind of widespread disenchantment with modern life. This is so important because it's when you listen to academic talks and not just here but many other parts of the world, you hear all these criticisms. But when it comes to the policymakers, people who are running the show in various countries, they're still preaching the same concept of progress, development, and how modernity can bring about all of these great fruits, leading to better life and so forth. So it's worth understanding and emphasizing that the statistic, the sociological analysis, and also other forms of analysis are actually showing a sort of widespread disenchantment with modern life. The acceleration problem, especially Hartmut Rosa, a German sociologist, he has been writing about this for a long time. And so he makes this, and he's a critical theory sociologist, not a kind of religious thinker, by the way. So he's saying the quality of human life, other people have said similar things, but just to quote one person, the quality of human life cannot be measured simply in terms of resources, options, speed, and efficiency. Instead, we must consider our relationship to or resonance with the world of nature. Yeah, and then we have to also understand the high price of this kind of life project, the high price of materialism. Values such as popularity and financial success are psychologically opposed to intrinsic values such as self-acceptance, affiliation, a sense of belonging in the community, etc. And materialism really distracts from human flourishing. All right, I guess we get some idea about that, about all of this. But I still want to push further and really now want to focus on I think about 7 or 8 minutes, about some of the kind of potential solutions. Right. So what to do about it? Well, I think this is a very complex situation. Some people might have the tendency to think, well, Islam is kind of the solution. I sometimes hear some such talks. I think that's a very simplistic way of explaining things. I think we do have to acknowledge that we live in a very different time, and there are all of these challenges, which, Iqbal, for example, proposed reconstruction, and other people are kind of redefining spiritual values, and there are all sorts of things people are doing. But here are some of my humble ruminations about this. Again, I'm now thinking about the kind of individual ways of kind of overcoming these issues. If we are students or if we are faculty, because this is a kind of widespread phenomena, or if we are workers somewhere. But I'm not thinking about kind of broad, I'm not thinking about kind of policy level interventions, which will require a kind of very different approach, because these issues are intimately connected to economics, politics, that we can't simply focus only on the individual, because, for example, the Burnout Society, the idea of kind of the identity being inflated, reinvented, this is deeply connected to what some people have called casino capitalism. So these things are interconnected, and this is a very complex issue. But here, in the interest of the time and everything, I just want to focus on the individual. All right, so for me, the first thing that we should think of is the idea of the balance between action and contemplation. I think there's just too much action in our world. And we kind of got a glimpse of that when the COVID happened. There were some reports how the vibration of the earth was completely different from its usual, kind of mode when, there's too much pressure on the earth itself. So much of our energy is outwardly directed to just, making use of nature and achieving this and that, if you're policymakers for the society. Or if you're not thinking about nature, it's very important because ecological issues is at the heart of this as well. We are actually thinking of ourselves as a resource. As I said, this is about self-exploitation. It's so kind of sometimes subtle that we're not even realizing that we are on this train and which is leading us somewhere else. So there has to be some kind of balance between action. We cannot be completely passive. We cannot, go back to some, I don't know, we cannot be nostalgic and think about times where everything was perfect or something. So the idea of contemplativity, the idea of kind of finding something, having a contemplative attitude, which will refocus our attention toward ourselves, but not through a different lens, is going to, I think, play an important role. So here, Islamic spirituality, I think, can offer a lot of resources, but it will depend how we are able to kind of make use of them, because it's not like there are kind of ready solutions for all of these issues. It might be that 2 minutes, yeah. So it's important to know the kind of dynamics and the complexity of our society. There are a lot of people having a lot of different beliefs. When we're talking about spirituality, even Islamic spirituality, even Sufism, even within the context of Pakistan or any other country, it means a lot of things to a lot of people. For some people, what the tradition itself provides automatically satisfies. For other people, you need kind of new answers. So here, I can just offer some pointers. Instead of kind of thinking about achievement, instead of kind of always the imperative to reinvent yourself and expand and transform, we can think about a simple life, which will satisfy our material and social needs, but at the same time will open a space within ourselves. So this will be a life of love, beauty, and inward joy. So just 1 minute, so this is also, yeah. So we can think about self-cultivation, leading to inner peace, but all this has to do with how you kind of experiment with the self. So ultimately, you need to have a kind of re-understanding of the self in order to achieve some of these qualities, which might reorient ourselves. We need to kind of change our definition of the self. Here, I have a theory based on a very complex theory of the self. And some of it is relevant, I'll not be able to touch. But some of the things in this conference have already been discussed, like forming spiritual communities, disciplining our negative emotions and controls. Some of these things are worth kind of thinking about. We can also think about the legacy of spirituality in Pakistan, especially in terms of music. I know we all listen to music, perhaps Basuri, something I guess very popular these days. So there are definitely music that kind of appeals to us especially when we're tired. We can listen to that. Ali Sethi, I know, is one of the popular singers. But there are also other forms of music. So here I'm thinking of Ustad Sami. I don't know whether anyone here has heard about Ustad Sami, but this involves a very different kind of music. I don't know if you listen to some music. It's a kind of Drupad Kawali. You sometimes feel that there's much more than just music. Is much more than entertainment. It's like there's a kind of inner peace that can radiate through music. So we have to kind of reorient. We have to kind of rediscover some of these things. At the same time, we have to understand the limits of the materialistic values that lead to this kind of burnout society. All right, I think my time is up. I'll end here. Thank you.
From the Syriac Peshitta, it's one of the Beatitudes. So Hazrat Isa's sayings, which have a certain pattern. I'll tell you the more familiar one afterwards, but I first want to tell you what they were singing. I don't know if you enjoyed it. I love this. Is one of my favorite albums. It's the San Antonio Vocal Arts Ensemble, and they did this album called Ancient Echoes, in which they tried to recreate, of course, who knows how accurately, music from the time of Jesus, from the time of Hazrat Isa, and immediately after, that is Second Temple period. How do we know what that was like? Please don't talk while somebody else is at the podium. So, you're still talking. I just said, please don't talk. Tube Vayun. So they were saying Tube Vayun. First of all, which means ripe or mature. Again, there we go. Not possible to sit quiet, to listen to anything for any extended period of time. Ripe, mature, having reached a stage of the fullness of the person I am meant to be. That's how one person has translated it. The Beatitudes show us what a mature disciple of Jesus is like. What a mature disciple of Jesus is like. And then, Tu bayom la miskanaha, which of course many of you will recognize because you know the word miskeen, which is there in Urdu. So in Aramaic, miskeen is obviously from Arabic and Aramaic are obviously very close. So you already have a certain sense of what miskeen means, but this meaning here is slightly different from what you are familiar with. La miskanaha, rooted in, firmly based on. So you know, of course, that miskeen is also related to the same root, you can hear it, maskan, yeah? Which means your place of residence, your home. Yeah? La miskanaha barruh, you know that as well. So tu bayun, those are ripe. Yeah? Those are ripe or mature, having reached a stage of the fullness of the person I am meant to be. Are those who are firmly rooted in, who reside in the spirit, varuh. Yeah? Actually, the translation here is, ripe are those who find their home in the breath, that is the spirit. Yeah? And then the second part, dadahoni malkuto daboshmayo. They shall be attuned to the inner reign of God, is how they have translated it. Dadilhoni means be in tune with, attuned to, and then Malkuto is the reign of God. Yeah? This is the beatitude that you are more familiar with as the meek, blessed are the weak in spirit. Blessed are the weak in spirit. Yeah, miskanaha. Blessed are the weak, baruch. Blessed are the meek, weak in spirit, or meek in spirit. Sorry, blessed are the meek in spirit, for they shall inherit heaven. Yeah, you'll go to heaven if you're poor. This, however, makes it much more complicated. Yeah, and makes it a matter much closer to what so many of us have been talking about. This being residing, the miskeen. So it's very interesting to think about the Arabic word. You know the word sukoon, sakin. Yeah, sukoon is, you know, in Urdu is calm. Yeah, sakin is silent or still. Yeah, and you know miskeen. You also know sakina. And sakina, very interestingly, like the Jewish word shekinah, means the presence of God. Yeah, so residing in the spirit is, of course, residing in the presence of God. So what they were singing, and you can imagine the enthusiasm that this must have been received with by so many poor people after Hazrat Isa. It's a source of joy also. Yeah, that's one of the things missing also in our lives. Yeah, is joy. We might experience pleasure. Of course, we experience pleasures of various sort. But what about this experience of calm joy? Bliss is what actually the best word for it. Bliss. Yeah, and not the moment we keep talking about mystical experience, which just actually alienates you from even the possibility of such an experience. Bliss, I think, is, you can see that it is must be possible for one to have blissful experience, to be blissful, one to be blissful. So I was playing this for my class just day before yesterday in a class that I teach called Gentleness and Grace. Yeah? Gentleness and Grace, and its subtitle is Withdrawing Power. Withdrawing power, which means, of course, also the power to withdraw. Yeah? the power to withdraw. In this class, we first of all look at all the ways in which people, start with a book called Giving Way. We've been talking about the everyday so much. This book shows how, it's called Giving Way, how we are gentle and give way, and other people are gentle and give way all the time. Yeah, of course, no social life would be possible without it. Yeah, even in the kind of society in which we live, the kind of terrible society that we have all been describing in various ways. Thank you for that brilliant presentation, by the way. I teach Professor Muhammad Faruque's book in another class called Comparative Hermeneutics of the Self. I'll just say something about that as well. This is related to these curricular matters, as well. So in Gentleness and Grace, we start with this, how gentleness exists in our everyday lives. And then we turn to various older traditions, because gentleness was one of the highest, the sage, the wise person, the awliya, are all the friends of God, that is. They are all gentle. This is the highest, actually, kind of comportment that a human being can have, the highest kind of comportment. The friends of God, awliya Allah, and sages, etc., people who are wise, this is what characterizes their comportment. Wise people are necessarily gentle and graceful. That's what and this, of course, involves the withdrawal of one's power. The withdrawal of power is actually what characterizes God. This is his first or her first quality. Rahmat, Rahm, mercy. Mercy is precisely the withdrawal of power that one has. So the sovereignty of God is actually, first of all, manifest in the fact that God affectionately withdraws his power. And Rahm is like the womb. So the womb also lets you be, allows you to be, lets you be. So similarly, God, that's what, once again, like the womb, which he says he named after himself. And we go both through, so Rahma, which is obviously very important. Actually, one of the main things we looked at is Hilm. Hilm actually corresponds to Rahma, because Hilm is also this quality of withdrawing power. It's also maturity. Of course, there are other connotations. It's usually translated as forbearance. But as locals know, Halim, this very soft, Salona sa uska maza hota hai, gentle and soft food that we have. Halim comes also from Hilm, which is soft and gentle, softness, which Arsalan was just talking about in the case of the Tablighi Jamaat. Extraordinary that they are cultivated in this very hyper-masculinist, nationalist culture of Islam, nationalist Islam that we have. There are these people who are cultivating gentleness, softness. That's wonderful. There are, of course, problems, and which some of them have been brought up, but that's a very worthy aspiration, because it's such an important value. We also look at gentleness in the Taoist tradition. In Taoism, also, that is one of the main qualities that characterizes the sage. Neoplatonism, we also look at Neoplatonism. So these various traditions, as in comparative hermeneutics of the self, we also look at Buddhism and Hinduism, apart from Islam, and ancient Greek ideas of the self. And many of those texts are right now in the Hindu section. We're reading Shankaracharya, who, of course, asserted against the Buddhist tradition that had, intellectually become quite dominant. He reasserted the reality of Brahman. And one of the things in the Advaita tradition, yeah, which is once again about detachment from this illusory world, yeah, into Brahman, yeah, so into the not self, non-self, yeah, which is the self ultimately. Tat tvam asi, you are not, you are that, you are that, you are not what you think you are, not the empirical. Bulla ki jana mein kaun, usme bhi yahi hai, कि you are not this empirical self which you mistakenly think is what you are. Yeah. The reason I'm talking about this is that many people, of course, have been gesturing. Once again, you also are gesturing to this other space. Yeah. I think a lot of us experience all kinds of things which we do not recognize, and also if you can't recognize it, you certainly can't think about it. Yeah. So first of all, recognize experiences that we have that are part of our everyday and remain possibilities and potentialities, yeah, as a result. And then we don't have the concepts to even recognize, we also don't have the concepts to recognize those experiences. Yeah. So time, for instance, yeah. So in this book, Gentleness, in this class, Gentleness and Grace, one of the books that we read is The Power of Gentleness by this remarkable philosopher, Anne Dufour Montel. The Power of Gentleness. She's remarkable. She had this remarkable death where she wrote all her life about risk and gentleness, and then died while very young, 53, died while trying to save these two children. Children survived, she died. In this book, Power of Gentleness, this is what she says about time. Gentleness is a relationship to time that finds in the very pulsation of the present the feeling of a future and a past reconciled. That is, of a time that is not divided. This is an experience of time that we have, all of us. Yeah? This is an experience of time that all of us have. The present and the past, yeah, are not ruptured in our experience like this. Yeah? Obviously, they can't be. There's some relationship between my experiences, my past experiences, and who I am now, and what I hope to be in the future. All of these in my, the actual experience of time, these dimensions of time are not ruptured. Yeah? In the way that both our sense of historical time, thanks to these modern periodizations, yeah, as well as our modern experience of time, thanks to the clock and the organization of life by these orders of time. Of course, Urudamini was already talking about that. Yeah. Our actual experience of time is quite plastic. Plastic, I don't mean this, cursed thing which has completely, overtaken our lives. I mean plastic in being malleable. Our experience of time is that time is malleable. We don't experience uniform time. There is no such experience of time. We do not experience time as a uniformity. It's precisely one moment to the next, things keep changing, your mood keeps changing, all kinds of things, our actual experience of time. But we have no way of actually articulating all of these very, very perfectly normal things, perfectly normal experiences, first of recognizing them, and then thinking about them. What we are lacking are the proper concepts. Of course, Professor Sajjad Rizvi and now his student, formerly our student, Uzair Ibrahim, are working on Islamic conceptions of time. Professor Rizvi's next book is going to be on time. Inshallah, soon. So, here's time. Look at space. Also, we do not experience, so in terms of concepts, a really, really important concept is ghaib, who Aaron also talked about. Ghaib, you can't be a Muslim if you don't believe in ghaib. If you don't believe in ghaib, you're not a Muslim. And it's not a question of belief, it's a question of recognizing. Yeah? It's a question of recognizing the reality of ghaib. Minimally for us, meaning, for instance, is something that still we experience as being in ghaib. Meaning, of course, there's no, you don't see it walking around, yeah? Or you do, actually. But you're just not capable of recognizing that entire space. So, first I talked about time, now I'm going to talk about space. This space of nothingness, this space of absence, this space of absence, or the absent. This is very much part of our lives. This is very much part of our experience, and meaning is strange in that way. It's not fully present. You're always chasing after it. So meaning is at least, half absent. You just get glimmerings of it, and then you try to run after it, but it's already, running away from you. So we experience it. Yeah, this is part of our experience. It's unimaginable to imagine a form of life in which there is no experience of absence. It's just a very, very important part. It's an entire space of experience, which closely related to all our longings. Yeah, of course, it's a very important part of human experience is longing. Yeah, it's just a very, very important part of human experience. What would be human experience without longing? Yeah. So, in the university we can't do much. Yeah, we can't really achieve very much, alas, in the university. Right? There's just too little time, and also the way the modern institution is constructed, the kind of stuff that Olu Damini was talking about. Yeah, I'm not Waliullah, right? A saint, or the sages, etc. All of that. That's not the kind of life I've lived, alas. Yeah, and it's something that I myself search for, long for, to live a good life. Yeah, still, and even at this age. Yeah. So, what can we actually do? One of the things that we are supposed to do is make available concepts which will enable people to think about their experience, and reorient themselves. This is why this session is called Orientation. So, how do we try to do that? I think this whole idea of progress actually is a major impediment in our ability to be able to both recognize and to think about our own experience. Both progress, both the idea of progress, and progress is obviously not just an idea. Yeah. Right? It's a world. It's the world in which we live. Yeah. It's a major impediment. Progress is a major impediment. Nationalism is the other major impediment. And of course, the two are intimately related to each other, because the whole project of the nation state is progress. That's why they came into existence. That's why they exist. Yeah, is to progress us. Right. So the first thing we try to do, so this is an opportunity to tell you about most of what I do is just teach these various classes, and part of the core. So one is, what is modernity, in which we do a big job on modernity. Right. So starting with progress, then with nationalism and the nation state, its militaristic origins, and also the colonial state and everything that it achieved, both the political, economic devastation that it wreaked on this region, and then Capitalism, the rise of capitalism, which is such an important part of experience, or the destruction of experience, actually. So, capitalism is so much a part of the destruction of human experience. It makes it impossible to have the proper experience of our relationships. You're actually standing there in front of somebody, and the only interaction that you are having with them is that you give them, a bill, and they give you something back. All of those interactions that we have are devastating. I mean, it's a destroyed experience of relationships. Actual relationships that we have. So, that guy I buy my cigarette from, I unfortunately smoke. So the guy I buy my cigarettes from, every day, what kind of interaction do I have with him? There are many people like that in our lives all the time, who we have interactions with, but then we have relationships with them, but we don't have relationships with them. It's very strange. It's a devastated experience. This is what devastated experience or the destruction of experience is also about. There's a lot more that it's about. So what we try to do is provide some of the concepts that might, after this job that we do on both global modernity as well as regional modernity. The devastation, there's a reason that we got here, right? There's a reason that we are where we are today. Where the 2-degree thing has already been passed, and now the UN is saying that we are looking at a 3-degree, hellish 3-degree future. It's already happened. I mean, if things continue like this, we will be extinct, by the next century. And people think, oh, that's a long way off. That's not so long. If we had a proper sense of what we owe our children and our grandchildren, which we do not, it's amazing. This is the first generation in the history of humanity that thinks our children will take care of these problems. Always people have said we want to leave behind a better world. They might not have been aware. But I've heard people actually say this. Our children will take care of it. And I look at them and I think, are you an adult? What kind of monstrous thing is this to say? That our children and our grandchildren will take care of this what? I don't even know what to call it. Qayamat is a good word, I think. They will take care of it. Well, one of the things that we can do is actually give them the tools which might allow them to, first of all, bear what they are going to have to live through. Which will involve a reorientation into a space, and have an access to a space which actually Pierre Hadot, a great scholar of ancient philosophy, called the inner citadel in his book on the Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius. That's the only way in which you can actually bear this world. Is to have this inner citadel and to retreat, have this space of contemplation in the midst of life, in which one is able to retreat. Otherwise, of course, we will be torn apart by what we have to experience and what we will have to experience in the world. So some of these concepts, so first after this modernity thing, we do Hikma, which is the history of Islamic thought, and that's what I meant in the title, Islamic studies. I mean Islamic studies in the curricular sense in this country, the way Islamic studies, which is a requirement, is taught. We teach it as the history of Islamic philosophy and mysticism along a few themes, and I'll just end by telling you what those themes are. So first of all, love. We spend 6-7 weeks on love. We start with love in the Quran. Rahma is, of course, love. It needs to be properly translated as loving mercy. So starting in the Quran, in the Hadith, Awliya Allah, philosophers, poets. There's a very, because that was the heart of the tradition. Pura mizaj badal chuka hai na hamara. Our entire orientation is messed up. Yeah? So our temperament is messed up. What was at the heart of the tradition was love. So to try to restore, we spend 6-7 weeks on love in all of these different ways in which it manifests itself in Muslim societies and actually in human societies, and is the foundation of human experience in general. I don't want to claim some kind of exclusivity for Islam. Yeah, this is narcissism. Yeah, is not, and even if it was, it should not be part of our tradition. Yeah, I really take what Oludamini was saying. This is why I teach, Buddhist conceptions of the self, Hindu conceptions of the self. We Muslims, well, like everybody else, have become even more narcissistic. Yeah, and of course, this is the age of narcissism. Yeah, the nationalism is all collective narcissism. Capitalism is individual narcissism. These are the motors of history. Yeah, okay, both me, and also. This is why we never seen a prime minister like this. This last prime minister, Imran Khan, he literally say me in this long speech that he gave hundreds of times. It's incredible. How is it possible? Yeah? Man, what's going on? Huh? So, these are signs of the times. Yeah? So obsessed, self-obsessed, and that's what the system runs on this. Yeah. So all kinds of, this is why people, the more you talk, the more successful you are in this world also. Yeah? It's a bizarre kind of, silence was very important in our tradition. You didn't waste your words. This is why when Prophet speaks, Imam Ali speaks, they speak extremely succinctly. They don't waste their words. Yeah, they're very silent most of the time. Yeah, very important quality also. But starting with love, then we turn to what corresponds to love, which is beauty. It should be, I think I'm going to rename it love and longing. Yeah, love and longing, because that's what it's actually about. Yeah? Because love is once again just like time, which is actually in our experience, multidimensional. Time is not unidimensional, time is multidimensional in our experience. Space is also multidimensional in our experience. Yeah? Similarly, love is multidimensional in our experience. Yeah? Now you think of love and all you think of is, sexual love. It's an unprecedented reduction in human desire, reduction of human desire. So, Noon Mim Rashid said, "Tamanna ki wusat ki kisko khabar hai jahanzad." Tamanna ki wusat ki kisko khabar hai jahanzad. And it is, of course, everybody knows, people even make fun of it. In our tradition, majazi and hakiki desire, two different forms of desire, are always there. It's almost a cliche. Yeah? These different dimensions of desire which everybody experiences and is at the heart of life. Yeah? So beauty also understood primarily through Ghazali as moral beauty. This is what makes people graceful. Yeah? Beauty, again, our conception of it has been destroyed. Yeah? So beauty as in moral beauty, ethical beauty. Then about light, we spend a few weeks both on light, so important in the Muslim tradition. Yeah. So not only is Surah Nur and that glorious, sublime ayat, the famous ayat from Surah Nur, Allah is the light of the heavens. Allah Nur samawati wal arz. Yeah. So we start with Ghazali's interpretation of that, and then we do philosophy of illumination. Yeah, a whole metaphysics of light developed by Sohrawardi. Yeah, and these things happen for a reason. Yeah, and of course it continues वो उस बड़ी अच्छी कवाली है, उसने M.F. हुसैन ने मीनाक्षी में अपनी फिल्म में डाली थी, नूर अला नूर. Yeah, so it's very much part of your culture. The light, yeah, and not obviously just this. Yeah, this is a derivative light. The light before this light, yeah, the inner illumination, yeah, and everything, not just we, everything is has various levels of light. This is what's Sohrawardi. And afterlight, limit. I really resonate with the point that Oludamini and other ways, other people were talking about this lack of delimitation. Yeah, delimitation. Ibn al-Arabi is also a part of both of these classes. Yeah, Ibn al-Arabi. So delimitation, three classes actually. Ibn al-Arabi appears in 3 different classes. One of them is in the core. He's just so important. And if you want to start thinking about conceptualizing experience, he's your man. Yeah. So we actually read it through this, I think, a really extraordinary philosopher who's not a professional philosopher, Salman Bashir. Yeah. His story of Islamic philosophy, yeah, in which he argues that Muslim philosophy, the exercise of reason, so at the limit of reason. So we're not talking about the irrational. There is no word for the irrational, yeah, in our language, in our languages. The irrational is something that is quite modern. That's why you have books about irrationality and this constant accusation of irrationality that we have. But that's by the by. The main point I want to make that he makes is that at the limit of reason, there is the moment of illumination. And that's how thought proceeds. Yeah. So once again, that's light reappears, yeah, in this last reading, which is actually about limit and going beyond the limit, which is obviously a very, very important part of Muslim experience. Yeah. A very, very, not just Muslim experience. Yeah, obviously, I want to emphasize that there are resonances. How could there not be between human experience in general? There are talking about the universal. Yeah, there are resonances. Of course, we should not collapse everything into one. That's also a problem. But we must also recognize the resonances that exist across traditions. Okay, I think that's enough.
Dr. Naqvi was scheduled to make a half an hour closing remark, so he folded his presentation with that, so we'll keep that part short. Dr. Zhang will now facilitate the discussion. After that, I'll have a few remarks to close it, and then we'll have a ceremony.
So, hello everyone. My name is Xiaoxi Zhang. So, I'm teaching a few Habib core courses here at Habib, as well as a few literature classes in the program of Comparative Humanities. And first of all, thank you so much for both speakers for your wonderful presentations. I personally learned a lot from both presentations. So, I actually have 2 questions. One directly inspired by the first presentation, and the other one directly inspired by the second presentation. However, both questions are intended for both speakers. So the first question kind of like was derived from Dr. Faruque's first presentation. So for me, so it's like, for the current semester, I'm teaching rhetoric and communication, which is the very first Habib core courses for all first-year Habib students. And in my seminar, actually more than half of the students are DSSC majors, which are kind of like basically students in the Dahani School of Science and Engineering. And also in the past, I've taught quite a few kind of like general education or maybe humanities classes that are intended for not only humanities majors, but also kind of like science majors engineers or kind of like students from the STEM fields. And one of the questions I always get from these students is basically, it's like, what you are telling me is interesting, but look, I have a lot of work. It's like I have a lot of classes to take within my major field of studies, and I feel like I'm already burned out. So I don't really think that essay writing or doing the readings or kind of like thinking philosophically is something that is directly relevant to the life that I'm currently having. And because of that, I feel like if I invest too deeply into your classes, then I would kind of like just burn out. I have to take care of my mental health. So I guess, I mean, in a way, I'm seeing some students kind of like struggling to find out. So basically, so it's like, how exactly can this knowledge kind of like be beneficial to them in terms of what they have to go through in their own professional lives? Because I mean, ultimately, we know that society has all sorts of problems, but there are people but there are still people kind of like facing all these problems in the society, some more so than the others. So I was wondering kind of like, maybe I may ask for the opinions or kind of like thoughts, or maybe kind of like this, the expectations both of you may have for students of yours who are not humanities majors in terms of how they can benefit from kind of like philosophical discussions or kind of like more kind of like spiritual kind of like or qualitative ways of reasoning or kind of like more deep philosophical reflections about everything. Thank you.
I actually asked that question to you perhaps yesterday. I asked, like, when you have this kind of well-developed, very well-rounded core curriculum, how about those students, kind of STEM students, what are their reactions? And you told me exactly what you described. So when I teach, I have teaching experience at UC Berkeley and Fordham University and now Cincinnati, but I've also experienced lecture at major universities. So when I teach courses, it's usually not just humanities students, it's always mixed. And because I also had a science background, and I personally, I love science, so I often use analogies for mathematics. So that's not a problem, but I think the deeper issue is to realize that what matters in life. So we are given this idea of career success, but oftentimes it's not clear where exactly we're going. So I just don't want to talk about myself because I was an economics student and it was just doing it in the British curriculum. It's a 3-year undergraduate, and outside of economics basically you don't read anything else. It's all just mathematics and economic theory, not even other forms of sciences. So to me that was just too restricting. So I think asking those questions and understanding that yes, when it comes to happiness, satisfaction in life, definitely there has to be a material basis. If we cannot ensure the basic needs, food, water, and shelter, and on some level, it's still possible to be. And there are historical examples, by the way, to be a saint of God. But let's talk about everybody. That's not so. The material needs. It's legitimate to think about those goals, but then there are also social goals or goods. Sorry, social goods, material goods, and social. They're also important. Because we're social beings. So we'd like to have communities, and we'd like to exchange gifts. Socialize, and that itself requires material basis. And each society has its conventions and so forth, like what is considered a kind of socially respectable line. So this is a delicate situation because there are countries where there are very rich people and so forth. But regardless, I think there's also the spiritual dimension, and that is not really taken into consideration. It's very later in life, like Silicon Valley people, people who they hire gurus. Now this is a multi-billionaire business as well in his spirituality, so it's really not helping. Because spirituality itself has, there's a book called Selling Spirituality. So this is a very complicated problem, but I think it's important to realize very early on that the orientation, what is meaningful in life. And I just don't want to speak for everybody, but I argued about this, what consists human flourishing, and I try to provide my humble own response that is in the book. But at least I think just to have that intuition that spirituality matters, because we're not biological machines, as is preached by scientists or technologists. We're just machines. Whatever problems we have, technology, ChatGPT, AI is just going to magically solve everything, keeping all of this. So that is false. That's not true. When you go deep down, you realize, there's much more to a human being, the self, than what appears. Even the books are limited. The most important stuff that I learned about myself, and I continue to explore this as in the tradition, you had pointed out, this is the self, according to I understand it, it's an ontological possibility of almost anything. People can become great human beings, but people can also become inhuman, and we witness this from time to time. So this is remarkable, the possibility and the fact that you can go in many different directions, but then having the right orientation, the right conceptual as well as existential framework is very important. And some key elements, if I may emphasize, at least for this humble self, compassion, for example, is absolutely important. And love, a kind of unconditional, selfless love. These things are easy to talk about. Even literature can go some way. Shakespeare, Rumi, Hafiz, and of course in our Indian tradition, there are so many great poets, especially I think of Abdul Latif Sindhi, Risalo, if you have read that. But it's about experience. It's about finding your own answers, and that takes a lot. That goes, tremendous courage, going beyond the curriculum and just what is taught by society. We have to explore and have the courage to ask the right questions. Okay.
Thank you.
Can I also respond to that
Please.
question?
Please.
Actually, some of the students who've showed up, there are not many students who showed up. I'm kind of disappointed. But those students, amongst many of the students who have showed up, you can see science students. Prominently, some of the best students I have are actually science students. So, but of course, and it's not just the science students, it's also the other people in terms of receiving the curriculum that we try to, this whole project of disenchanting people with modernity. The modernity is the Tilsima Hoshruba. If there was a Tilsima, the Matrix, the old, there's an old tale which actually went on for, when they first, Tilsima Hoshruba, when they first published it, because it was only oral, came to something like 42 volumes. So it just goes on, and it's about this tilsim, which is a spell that has been put on a certain region. Well, now the whole earth is under the spell. I say this is the spell to end all spells. Is this enchantment with modernity that we are all trapped in. Somebody needs to get us out of this trap, as happens. And so it's with cunning that you have to do it. Actually, the people fighting against these magicians who put a spell on the earth are ayyar, which means that they are cunning. So we have to be cunning. And cunning involves, of course, doing a lot of research, right? Without that, you cannot be cunning. So you have to know a lot about modernity, for example. But then they become persuaded, because eventually it's just forcing them to recognize what their own experience is. And ultimately they say that, lots of science students, some graduates who are already here who are already very successful, like Faruque, for instance, they're very successful, set up a startup, etc., which does good work, not all startups do, but one of the people who really got it. So I don't think the kind of curriculum we teach, the problem is not just for the science students, it's also for the social sciences, because it's challenging the entire orientation in which of the world in which they have, of course, been born and been raised. So Professor Alexander Key is also on the board of this university, and we were discussing this, what is modernity, and he said, because it's devastating, just recognizing what it is that you actually live through, he said it makes them resilient. When I tried to do this kind of thing in America, when I was teaching there, they said, this is, students will commit suicide. It's never happened. It's bizarre. I said, I didn't say it, I thought to myself, you mean that if I say these things, you're living in this house of cards, that one, Poco will come along and go, and the whole house of cards will fall apart? It's bizarre. Yeah, and it also just goes to show you how anxious they are. So that's what I would say. Yeah, of course it's hard and not everybody gets it, but whatever little they get, that's good for them. Yeah.
All right. So I do have a second question, but I think that we are running out of time. So I wanted to maybe give a chance for the audiences to ask questions first, and then.
You said spirituality matters, and you spoke of spells, Dr. Naqvi. But how do you deal with the big elephant in the room, which is another spell that has gripped the Muslim world in recent times? And what I'm referring to is this new secularized, materialist theology, ritualized, mechanical spirituality, one that has argued in length or at length that because of the spatio-temporal constraints on sensibility, metaphysical facts will forever remain a mystery. I'm referring to Salafism. That is a challenge, especially as two public Muslim intellectuals. When you speak to Muslims, how do you rescue them from the tentacles of a seemingly spiritual worldview, a seemingly authentic, valid theology that, as a matter of fact, is perfectly conformed, perfectly aligned with modernity and other God-forsaken, anti-metaphysical worldviews? Because you said you can't be a Muslim if you don't believe in the ghaib. I mean, that's sort of mild takfir aside. There were many medieval authorities who actually did espouse a worldview that denied metaphysics, and one of them is Ibn Taymiyyah.
Right.
So you also, if you're going to make that statement, I think you should rest it on solid theological grounds. And there were other groups who did not believe in the possibility of ghaib, because for them, perhaps some sort of precursors to Kantian metaphysics, because of the limits on our sensibility, metaphysical facts will always elude us. So, ila kayf, just let it go.
I'm not trying to impose it on anybody. I mean, it's just, first of all, so the Salafis actually, there are Salafis at Habib University, or at least when they get here. Yeah. But the way we do it, this is why we do the critique of modernity first. Yeah, so they do the critique of modernity first in the, in the spring semester of their freshman year, and then we get to Hikma only in the sophomore year. So first in the global level and then in the regional level, because there's a lot of distrust. So they'll think that if you are, peddling an alternative Islam, yeah, it's because you are influenced by the West. Yeah. Well, we make very clear for 2 semesters, that that's why we start with that. So a critique of modernity first for a long time, and that makes everybody trust you. Yeah, and then you can be honest about these other things. So my strategy, it's a kind of cunning in itself. Yeah, my strategy is just to be honest also. Yeah. Many years ago, it's about 25 years ago now, I got into a car accident, and the car accident actually what had happened was that it was an ISI truck that had hit my car. ISI is Pakistan's premier intelligence agency. I don't know if you know about this. So then I got, and then they sued me. Not only did they, crash into my car, but then they sued me. So I went to their offices, and then I used to work at this Sustainable Development Policy Institute, where Indians also used to come. This is not possible in Pakistan anymore, but it was then. So when they when I went there, they interviewed me about the activities of my institution. And I was just honest about everything. So I said to him, I said, I don't think that India is our problem. He said, what do you mean? So I said, I think our problem is the national security establishment of Pakistan. So I'm sitting in the ISI fort in Islamabad. And so he said, oh, you're saying from a humanitarian point of view. So I said, no, I'm not talking from a humanitarian point of view. I'm talking from a security point of view. I think the biggest national security threat to Pakistan is the security establishment of Pakistan. Yeah? And then we had a really honest conversation, and they never bothered me after that. Yeah? So if you're just honest, because what creates a problem is when you're dishonest. If you're really honest, and maybe I'm too honest, with some students, I guess some people, because I get very agitated, passionate, which serves to turn off some people initially, then it also, like everything is ambiguous in the world, so it also kind of builds trust. This guy is just being honest.
Hi. So basically my question is, what I feel like is that there is, when it comes to ideas such as spirituality, there is also certain burden of spirituality. We have to live a certain lifestyle, there is certain kind of life. And when it intersects with ideas such as identities or politics, what I feel like is we come back to square one. Where we have to be in some way living a certain kind of lifestyle, and thus there might be a rise of religious fundamentalism in ourselves. So how do we really commensurate both these kind of very conflicting things, that A is spirituality, love, and all these kind of things, and then some level of fundamentalism and certain lifestyle we have to live, especially when it comes to Islam and political Islam in more specifically.
So I'm not actually very clear about the connection between spirituality and politics. So your question, do you mean to imply that spirituality sometimes leads to fundamentalism? It can happen. For example, when it comes to Sufism itself, historically as well as now, there are all these Sufi brotherhoods, and sometimes it's very visible, the way they dress, they talk, there's a kind of ceremonial attitude. And this has been actually criticized over and over by Sufis themselves. And I personally think it's more about your heart, not about external appearances. But sometimes it is possible to dress in a certain way and have a more group feeling and so forth. And also you have to, that can be a problem. You kind of impose yourself on certain behavior, and after a while you just feel like this is not for you. So before getting, it's a problem with actually spiritual form itself. So in Islamic context, spirituality, it occurs in so many different ways. And not all forms of spirituality are kind of viable options. And secondly, I don't think a very rigorous spirituality, a kind of serious spiritual life is also equally possible for everybody. So there are a lot of people I hear, because, for example, you hear a lot about yoga and meditation. But then I also have students sometimes, or people saying, "Oh, I don't like to meditate. It actually bothers me." So we also have to be open, because we just feel like there's this solution that will work for everybody. But I think in the context of a religion like Islam, even without a kind of formal spiritual setting, there are things that you can do that creates a kind of contemplative dimension in your life, peace. I've seen many elderly people who definitely are not from Sufi orders, but you can feel a sense of peace and calm, unfortunately disappearing fast. And unfortunately, in the West, in Western culture, where I can speak as a Western Muslim, the idea of elderly man is actually, it's no longer a category. Even people have used the idea that you can get old. It's a bizarre thing to even imagine, because it's all about being young. And it's amazing to see how that people are they're trying using all of these technologies to look young and to remain young, and so as if becoming old is something to be really shunned and be afraid of. Whereas in earlier times, I'm definitely not. I personally feel like I went through such a transformation. I'm probably from a very different time, and anyway, I personally actually associate elderly age, old age with wisdom. So anyway, so it's a complex question. One has to figure that out oneself.
Can I respond to that? Yes. So thank you for that question, because it's a very relevant question today. Once again, this co-optation of spirituality, which has, to some extent it was always there. Obviously, somebody like Hujwiri is already saying millennium ago that, Sufism, only the word, Tasawwuf, only the word exists, the thing that it referred to is gone. So that's over 1,000 years ago. But I think our situation is just in the past couple of decades, right? So both in India, there are these gurus who are billionaires, and spirituality has become such a huge dhanda. In my own lifetime, here in Pakistan, spirituality has become such a huge dhanda. It also hasn't entered our politics in this way before. You know who I'm referring to. Ruhuniyat. Who was that? Who said Ruhuniyat? Just once again, Imran Khan. He was saying, what he literally said? He said, I think I was spiritually very advanced, but my wife, Bushra Bibi, she is even more spiritually advanced than I am. Look at them. Look at their lives. Look at the lives that they have lived. Look at the lives they were living when he was saying this, and then talk to me about spirituality. Yeah? So, this is why this is called ethical, the ethical and the spiritual. The spiritual is not something that exists apart from the ethical. Yeah? Nobody is a friend of God who is, narcissistic and full of themselves and whatnot, who keeps going on meh. No friend of God is going to keep on going meh. Yeah? So the ethical and the spiritual, this is why we emphasized also in this. Yeah? Okay, anyway, I think that's fine.
Excuse me. Hello. Thank you for organizing this conference, first of all. I enjoyed it. I liked the different perspectives. It was a good opportunity to learn. My question is predominantly for Professor Nauman Naqvi, centered on his talk. So we spoke about love as a central theme in Hikma and something that is important in Islam. And you mentioned that you don't like to classify Islam as something that has love centrally, and that you also push a sort of idea of religious plurality. But I was sort of confused in the sense that in Islam there's also the idea of having to follow this sort of submission within Islam. Like love is a very major theme, but there's also the point of Tawheed and the point of centrally loving God as one and glorification of Him as a sole entity. And there was also a verse which I sort of wanted to...
But that's what it's about. That's what... You haven't taken Hikma?
No, I haven't, but I wanted to get your input.
But that's what the love thing is about.
Yeah, it's definitely linked to it. But there was a verse in the Quran, like for example, there's I think Surah Al Imran, that whoever desires a religion other than Islam, then it will not be accepted of them, and they will be among the losers in the hereafter.
Yeah, but by teaching these texts, I'm not becoming every week becoming a Buddhist and then becoming a Hindu and then becoming
so my
Jewish
question is,
or something like that.
My question is that if Islam is sort of pushing the sort of essence that its Tawheed is what one must follow, then by pushing a sort of plurality, are we not in essence going in contradiction to that?
No, plurality exists. I'm not pushing plurality. Plurality is there. And the way Muslims have engaged, because Muslims are, the traditional Muslim, as opposed to modern Muslims, the traditional Muslim attitude has been, because the Quran says that God left nobody without guidance. Har kisi ko hidayat di, and sent 124,000 prophets. How many prophets do you know?
26 in the Quran.
So that leaves how many?
Quite a few.
Yeah, right? So the overwhelming majority of prophets you don't know. Traditional Muslim attitude has been just to accept these people as being prophets, whoever, the gods, for instance, that other people think of as gods, they accept human beings who they think of as gods, they accept them as prophets. And then they try to find the truth within those traditions. Yeah? So, ek Maulvi Sahib the, from the middle of the 20th century, right now I'm forgetting his name, he wrote this fantastic 4-volume memoir, maybe Sajjad knows. He was from Nadwa, an important alim. That's him. What's his name again? Abul Hasan Ali Nadwi. Yeah, 4-volume memoir. In that he says, right in the beginning, he says कि इस्लाम जैसा मज़हब जिसके अंदर सब कुछ कबूल करने की, is so that he was talking about how receptive Islam is. Muslims did not try to go everywhere and try to impose Arabic on people, for instance. There are Muslims all the way from Indonesia to what language do they speak? They all speak their vernaculars. How many Muslims out of the Muslims in the world know Arabic? Yeah? And all kinds of very open attitude towards all kinds of different practices, both in this region, all over the world. In Africa, you saw Olu Damini. Yeah? So that's our tradition. Our tradition is extremely plural. Yeah? So this idea that we have to impose monotheism, you cannot impose monotheism on people. And Tawheed in any case, yeah, is unification. Yeah? It's not unity. Tawheed, if you understand the word, and it's a process, it's an aspiration, it takes work. It's not just a question of it's not just a belief. Tawheed requires considerable amount of effort on our part in order to realize the unity of the cosmos. Yeah, so Tawheed is challenging. Islam is not आपकी जागीर नहीं है. Islam is a challenge to us. Tawheed is a challenge to us. Tawheed is very, very demanding. It means that you have to accept everything as coming from God. Yeah? That includes other religions. So that's what I would say to that.
Well, thank you very much. We're ending on this note of cosmology. I'm just going to say one thing very, very briefly. I began the conference, I didn't flesh it out properly, but I began the conference with a metaphor of light, and how what's crucial about light is that it withdraws. In order to give meaning, in order to give visibility, it withdraws. I want to leave us with another cosmological object of light that I'm just going to leave there as a kind of an image and a metaphor, since we've been really dancing around it, talking about it in different ways. And that's the black hole. The black hole is now a reality. It's a cosmological fact of the universe. It's not, so what I'm going to present is not just a map of discourse. I mean, it is that too, but it's also a map of, I think, reality, a map of the universal. What we have in some sense has been talking about, if you look at I used to play squash with Professor Alexander Hamilton, who's a major physicist at the University of Colorado, and he didn't know what department I was in, but we got talking and he said, I study singularities, I study black holes. And I was like, really? I also study singularities. And he looked at me like, what kind of a moron are you? Like, you're not in the physics department. I said, no, but I study singularities. Anyway, so I said, can you define a singularity? So he defined a singularity in the most interesting way. He said a singularity is something that exists but is impossible. And this was a physicist giving a definition of a cosmological object. So if we look at this image here, the black hole, let's pretend, obviously it doesn't exactly look like the images before were more realistic, but if this is the black hole, we have been using different terms to characterize, because what is a black hole? A black hole takes in everything, right? And yet it is foundational to the universe. That's what physicists are telling us, cosmologists are telling us, that black holes are fundamental to the existence of the universe. So we've been talking about, in various ways, the event of being. We've been giving it different names: beyond being, death, temporality, the abyss, the void, the ghaib, the time-space clearing, the presence of an absence. And I think this is a really sort of interesting metaphor, is that God is the presence of an absence, and somehow we have to orient ourselves around this contradiction, this ambiguity, this paradox. If you want to do it from Lacanian psychology, I guess you might call it the real of the real, but ultimately the possibility of impossibility, which is of course another way of defining death and human finitude. After we die, all our potential becomes impossible. And yet that is the only certainty that we all have after this conference, is this last moment. Anyway, there's lots more to be said about this. We are trying to do the impossible. You're all trying to do the impossible. And we have no choice but to pursue and to persevere in that task, as difficult as it is. But thank you all for coming in. Nauman is going to say a few more closing remarks, just for a minute, but thank you all. And then we will wrap this up. But a round of applause once more for the speakers and everyone for being here.
I just want to thank everybody who's been here, but especially thank the speakers. Thank you so much, Ahab. Thank you so much, Olu Damini. Thank you so much, Muhammad. Thank you so much, Shanila. Thank you so much, Alexander. Thank you so much, Arsalan. Thank you so much, Aaron. Really just thank you, Sajjad. Ghar ki murgi dal barabar. Sajjad is actually one of Habib University's biggest, what should I say? I mean, he supports us in so many different ways. Huh? Yeah, he's the eminence grace. Yeah, so in some sense, he's behind the scenes, but he has had a very important role to play for us. So thank you all of you. Really, I mean, it was an enlivening couple of days, and made me quite confident that I am not insane, and that there are other people who inhabit a similar mental space, right, and who are thinking. I mean, there's so much resonance amongst this group, yeah. So it's really the 10th conference had this remarkable grace about it, yeah. Had this remarkable grace about it, for which I am very grateful to all of you. Not only are you scholars, मगर आप नेक लोग भी हैं. तो ये तो not only are you scholars, but you are good people. Thank you so much.